The history books tell you that George Mallory and Andrew Irvine vanished into the mist on the 8th of June 1924, chasing the summit of the world. They tell you about the oxygen apparatus, the tweed jackets, and the storm that swallowed them. But the books are empty. They are sanitized ledgers, written by men in comfortable London offices who have never heard the wind scream at 26,000 feet. My name is Dr. Silas Sterling. I was the expedition surgeon for the 1924 British Mount Everest expedition. I stayed at Camp the 4th on the North Col while Mallory pushed for the top. I am an old man now, and the frostbite took my toes 50 years ago. But the cold I feel when I close my eyes has nothing to do with the temperature. We did not lose those men to gravity. We lost them to the landlord of the death zone. Before we continue, please make sure you leave a like and let us know where you are watching from. Thanks. Everest is not just a mountain. It is a biological dead zone. Above 20,000 feet, the human body begins to consume itself. Your blood thickens to sludge, your brain swells against your skull. You hallucinate. You see things that aren't there. But the tragedy of 1924 wasn't that we saw things that weren't there. It was that we refused to believe what was standing right in front of us. The unease began long before the summit push. It started on the approach through the Rongbuk Valley. The local monks at the monastery warned us. They were polite, offering us butter tea and blessings, but their eyes were hard. The head lama spoke to General Bruce through a translator. He didn't speak of storms or avalanches. He spoke of the Migo, the wild man of the snows. He said that the mountain was a temple and the upper slopes were guarded by watchers who did not sleep. We laughed. Of course we laughed. We were men of the British Empire, armed with modern science and arrogance. We dismissed it as peasant superstition. We were there to conquer geology, not folklore. By late May, we had established the high camps. The weather was brutal. The wind sounded like a freight train that never stopped passing. At Camp the 3rd, the Sherpas became difficult. These were men who could carry 80 pounds up a vertical ice wall without complaint. But they stopped talking. They stopped smiling. Pasang, our serter, came to my tent one evening. He was trembling. "Doctor," he said, his voice low, "the tracks, you must look." I followed him out into the biting cold. The wind had scoured the snow crust clean. About 50 yards from the camp perimeter near the edge of a crevasse, there were prints. They were not bear prints, they were bipedal. They looked like the footprint of a barefoot man, but the scale was monstrous 18 inches long, nearly 10 inches wide. The toes dug deep into the ice, suggesting immense weight. "Sunday melt," I said, trying to be rational. "It distorts the shape of small animal tracks, makes them look bigger." Pasang looked at me with pity. "No sun today, doctor. These are fresh." We pushed on to Camp the 4th on the North Kernel. The air was so thin, every movement felt like wading through molasses. Mallory and Irvine were focused on the summit. They were possessed by the mountain. But the rest of us, we were being hunted. On the night of the 5th of June, 2 days before the final summit attempt, the isolation at Camp the 4th was absolute. I was in a tent with Odell. The wind had died down for a brief window, leaving a silence that was deafening. Then we heard the whistle. It wasn't the wind whistling through the rocks. It was a rhythmic, rising and falling trill. It sounded almost bird-like, but it came from the lungs of something massive. It echoed off the ice walls. "What is that?" Odell asked, looking up from his journal. "A snow leopard. Too high for leopards," I said. I gripped my Webley revolver. I kept it under my sleeping bag, mostly to put down a horse if it broke a leg. But now it felt like a toy. The whistling stopped, replaced by the sound of crunching snow. Heavy, deliberate footsteps circling the camp. Crunch, pause, crunch, pause. It was assessing us. I unzipped the tent flap a few inches and peered out. The moonlight on the snow was blindingly bright. At first, I saw nothing but the jagged shapes of the seracs then. One of the seracs moved. It stood on a ridge about 100 yards away. It was upright, covered in shaggy white fur that blended perfectly with the snow, except for the dark patches of dirt or dried blood on its chest. It had to be 8 feet tall. Its arms hung low, past its knees. It wasn't stooped like an ape. It stood with a terrifying, intelligent posture. It was watching us. I blinked, blaming the hypoxia. Oxygen starvation, I whispered to myself. It is a shadow. But the next morning, 3 oxygen cylinders from the supply dump were gone, not rolled away by wind, taken. We found one of them 400 yards down the slope. It had been twisted. The thick steel cylinder was bent in half, crushed like a tin can. There were teeth marks in the metal grooves deep enough to sever a man's arm. Mallory saw it. He stared at the ruined cylinder for a long time. Then he looked up at the summit. "We go up," he said. We didn't come this far to be scared off by a bear. He left with Irvine the next morning. That was the last time I saw them alive. The horror didn't happen to them. It happened to us. The support team left behind at Camp the 4th to wait. 2 nights after they left, the storm hit. It was a blizzard that buried the tents in minutes. We were fighting to keep the canvas from collapsing. I was sharing a tent with a young porter named Pemba. The wind was howling so loud you couldn't hear yourself think. Then the tent wall ripped open. It wasn't the wind. A claw, a hand with black nails as hard as iron, slashed through the canvas like it was paper. The cold air rushed in, freezing the moisture in our breath. Instantly, Pemba screamed. A massive furred arm reached in. It ignored me. It grabbed Pemba by the sleeping bag. I saw the creature's face in the light of the hurricane lantern. It was a nightmare of evolution. A flat, black face, leathery and wrinkled, with eyes that burned with a red luminescence. It had no nose, just 2 vertical slits, and the teeth, fangs that interlocked like a bear trap. It dragged Pemba out. He clawed at the ground, at the tent poles, at me. I grabbed his hand, but the force pulling him was hydraulic. It yanked him into the blizzard. I heard his scream fade instantly, swallowed by the wind in a deep, guttural roar that shook the ice beneath me. I was left alone in the shredded tent with the storm raging. I huddled in the corner, gripping my revolver, waiting for the hand to come back for me. I fired 2 shots into the dark opening blindly. I heard nothing but the wind. The next morning the storm broke. The silence returned. I crawled out of the wreckage. The camp was destroyed. 2 other tents were flattened. There was no sign of Pemba, no blood. The snow had covered everything. But there were tracks. They led away from the camp, up, not down toward safety, up toward the northeast ridge, toward where Mallory and Irvine had gone. I realized then with a sickening jolt it wasn't just hunting for food. It was clearing its territory. It was following the intruders. Odell survived. He was in a tent buried deeper in the snowdrift, which had hidden him. We were the only 2 left at Camp the 4th. The other Sherpas had fled during the night, risking the descent in the dark rather than stay with the beast. "We have to go up," Odell said, staring at the tracks leading to the summit. "We have to warn them." "They are gone, Odell," I said. "Look at the tracks. It's following them." We waited 1 more day. We scanned the ridge with telescopes. At 12:50 p.m., Odell saw 2 black dots moving on a rock step nearing the summit. He thought they were men. I looked through the glass. I saw the 2 dots. But I saw a 3rd shape behind them. It was white, blending with the snow. But it moved with a loping speed that no climber could match. It was stalking them. The clouds rolled in then, covering the mountain. We never saw the dots again. We retreated. It was a retreat of shame and terror. We practically ran down the North Col, sliding and falling, looking over our shoulders every second. We felt eyes on us the whole way. That whistling sound followed us down to Camp the 3rd. It echoed from the cliffs, mocking us. When we reached base camp, General Bruce asked for a report. We told him about the storm. We told him about the oxygen failure. We told him Pemba fell into a crevasse. We lied. Why? Because who would believe us? In 1924, you didn't tell the Royal Geographical Society that a prehistoric monster ate your porters. You told them the mountain won. You maintained the dignity of the dead. But they found Mallory's body in 1999. I was still alive to hear the news. They said he was found face down, preserved by the cold. They said he had a broken leg and rope, jerk injuries. They said it looked like a fall. I looked at the photos, the ones they didn't publish in the magazines. I have friends in high places. I saw the close-ups of the shoulder. There were puncture marks. 3 deep parallel holes in the deltoid muscle, not from rocks, not from a fall. They were bite marks. And the clothing. The back of his jacket was shredded, ripped open from the outside. Mallory didn't just fall, he was thrown. I am 90 years old now. I sit in my study in Sussex and the fire is always lit, but I am never warm. People still talk about the mystery of Everest. Did they make it to the top? Did they die on the way down? Doesn't matter. The summit is not the prize. The summit is the bait. The Yeti is not a myth. It is not a monkey. It is the immune system of that mountain. It has lived there since the ice ages, and it does not like fleas crawling on its skin. We go back there year after year. We bring more gear, more people, more noise. We think technology makes us safe. But I know what I saw in that tent. I know what crushed that steel cylinder. If you are a climber, if you dream of standing on the roof of the world, listen to me. When you are in the death zone, and the wind dies down, and you hear a whistling sound that reminds you of a bird, do not look for the source. Do not look out of your tent. Turn off your light, hold your breath, and pray that it is already eaten, because the mountain remembers, and it is still hungry.